Hello and welcome to the first edition of the NRL round recap, where we look into the round that previously had played and recap it. I mean, it's a pretty simple explanation. But anyways, let's get into it. Round one of the 2023 NRL season. So the opening game kicked us off at Parramatta as the Parramatta Eels took on the Melbourne Storm at CommBank Stadium. This game is the literal definition of a battle of attrition. It took relatively about 30 minutes for anything interesting to happen, which was the first try scored by Will Penasini, but then it just became instant toing and throwing. And if any game was going to finish as a draw, this was certainly going to be the one. But of course, we have Golden Point, regardless of what your opinion of it, so there has to be a winner, unless there isn't. What I will say is Harry Grant with the absolute ball play of the century, running up the guts to score a try in Golden Point to seal the game, somewhat in close fashion to how the Melbourne Storm lost to Parramatta down in Melbourne last year. But it's hard to say, a game that went to Golden Point in the opening game of the season, I haven't seen that since 2012 with the Knights and the Dragons. And with this result, it kind of laid down the tarmac for some of these close matches that we would later see on as the round progressed. Now we move on to the first game on Friday as we see the New Zealand Warriors take on the Newcastle Knights. I'm often reminded when I watch the highlights of this game of Everywhere at the End of Time, which is a 6-hour compilation of about 6 albums released by an artist called The Caretaker, which uses ballroom music from the 1920s and starts degrading them over time as a symbolism of the progression of Alzheimer's disease. The reason why I'm bringing this up is watching the Knights taking on the New Zealand Warriors for 80 minutes was basically that album but sped run, and also there's a visual element. Both teams had a load of chances to try to get points and seal the game. For example, in both halves, the Knights came out firing, scoring a try within the first couple of minutes, and then completely dying off. And it was the same case for the Warriors, who had majority of the momentum in the first half, but couldn't really set a score that would put the game out of reach. And the game was only really brought out of reach when Wade Egan scored with a couple of minutes to go, but even still, there was still a chance that the Knights could have still came back. In terms of personal performances, I think Nicole Clockstead had an absolute game to remember. Obviously, one of the main highlights is him stopping Kalen Ponga in a one-on-one. But in fairness, that actually wasn't the best try saver of the game because it was not Nicole Clockstead on Ponga that was the try saver, but it was the independent doctor on Kalen Ponga telling him to come off the field when the Knights had a very good chance of scoring and taking the lead. I'm not bitter about it at all. But yeah, obviously this is a step in the right direction for the New Zealand Warriors, but I mean, with their performance against a team that a lot of people have in the bottom four, I don't really see how the Warriors are going to go when they take on actual opposition. Now we go into the final game on Friday as we saw the Penrith Panthers taking on the Brisbane Broncos. And you can fairly say to say that with the amount of signings that have been made from the Panthers leaving over the course of a couple of years, the competition has now started to catch up. Brisbane came out firing in the opening 20 or so minutes. Herbie Farnworth obviously getting a double. Basically a couple of days after he is announced that he is leaving the Broncos to go to the Dolphins in 2024. That's going to be very interesting to say the least. But again, a very close game, and Panthers weren't really forced into it. They just kept making several amounts of mistakes, but good win for the Broncos, and obviously without Reece Walsh, so who knows how good they could actually become once they have a full-strength team. I know there was this rumor going around about this argument between Jamin Salmon and Jerome Luai, and it's they're just having a little bit of an argument. And they're this leaked audio of a massive blow-up. It wasn't a massive blow-up, and it wasn't leaked audio. It's just the mic picked it up. It's not a leak. You could probably hear it from the broadcast itself. Yeah, I do think the Panthers can very much bounce back over the next coming weeks, but I think it's a very good signs for the Broncos. In continuation of results that I did not expect at all, was the only real game where there was a major blowout in circumstances, which is still 25 points, which is still technically a blowout, but the Manly Seagulls up against the Canterbury Bulldogs at 3 p.m. on Saturday. Daly Cherry Evans hat-trick. That's all I'm going to say. I do know from one of my mates who is a Bulldogs fan was talking about that they did have a few players out, but I just think this was a complete performance there by the Seagulls, and the Bulldogs weren't even really out of it. It's not like they were really shut out of the game, but it's just Manly just came to play and have a lot to prove, obviously, after this whole situation last year with, losing about 10 or so games in a row to prevent them from making the final. So very good signs coming out of the Manly camp. I still think the Bulldogs can go well. It's just obviously probably just round one jitters. Now we go into the North Queensland Cowboys versus the Canberra Raiders match, and oh my god, the Cowboys almost blew this match. It was weird. It was like as soon as the second half happened, it was nearly all Canberra. Like, Canberra, in fairness, probably from the second half performance alone, in my opinion, should have won this game. But unfortunately, it's just, by the time it got to the point when they were trying to get a try that would put them in front, they just kept having mistake after mistake after mistake and just couldn't put the game to bed, which obviously gave the opportunity for Chad Townsend to kick the field goal and seal the game. I don't think the Cowboys are going to go well this year from this. I think both teams as well, but I will say the Cowboys need to work on their defense because Canberra very much, in my opinion, should have won that game, but it wasn't to be. But I do think both teams can go well this year. Now we go to the main event on Saturday, which was the Cronulla Sharks against the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Obviously, the semi-final rematch from last year, and it was a physical match. Oh boy, it is physical. The Wade Graham hit was probably one of the best hits I've ever seen. Obviously, he did leave his feet and absolutely collide with him, so his sin bin does make sense. But I think this is just showing with terms of South Sydney, of how well their team has bigged themselves up. I mean, Campbell Graham had an absolute fantastic performance on Saturday. He really came into his own and trying to cement himself as one of the best centres in the comp. And I feel like the Sharks also went all right as well. Obviously, they scored the try when they were down to 12 men and very much had all the momentum, but they just kept making mistakes. They couldn't kick the ball out for a penalty. They kept making forward passes and knock-ons, so it kind of did stuff them in the end. But I think both teams obviously can go well, but I think South are really trying to place themselves in the discussion of titles. Now we go to Sunday, and okay, let's talk about it. The Redcliffe, no, you can't say Redcliffe, the Dolphins up against the Sydney Roosters. The Sydney Roosters, obviously, I know, have a thing where they don't start off the season well. They start pretty slowly, but, I mean, come on. They played actually pretty badly, and I think the Dolphins really capitalised on it. It was a great day had by all. I mean, Jermaine Asako had a great day. Jeremy Marshall-King had a very deserving 6 points from the Dally M system, because apparently it's now 2 judges, not 1 anymore, so that's why there's more points. But Felice Kafusi, he had a personal gripe with the Roosters. But yeah, first half was actually pretty even, but the Dolphins just ran away with it and capitalised on the chances that the Roosters were giving them. And honestly, fairytale start to the season, and this now puts a lot of questions as, wait, the Dolphins can make the finals this year. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes. So very happy for the Dolphins getting the win, but I still think the Roosters are going to be pretty good. I mean, it's kind of a tradition that they start slow. And now we go into the final game of the round as we saw the West Tigers take on the Gold Coast Titans. Man, I was going on about the album about Alzheimer's. I think a visual element of someone going through that was probably me watching the last time these two teams played. But it was a great game by the Titans. Really phased the Tigers out. I do know the Tigers did have a couple of players out, but I think it was a complete performance there by the Titans. Philip Sami getting a double, very good to see. It's just the Tigers weren't really in it. They did sort of started getting a couple of tries in the second half, but it's the Titans just hanging on, phasing the crowd and the Tigers out of the game. So very good to see. A lot of positive signs for the Titans, so you can start having evidence to start backing up that they can very much challenge for the finals. Now overlooking the whole round as it is very strange to say that all 4 Queensland teams won. And out of all the 10 teams in New South Wales, only 2 won, and the 2 that did win ended up playing Sydney teams, which was the Rabbitohs beating the Sharks and the Seagulls beating the Bulldogs. From this whole round now there is a lot of questions, and now you've got to properly think about what's going to actually happen over the course of the season, because Now there's even a lot more questions. You think there was going to be questions answered this round, but now there's a whole lot more questions, to say the least. But that's the end of the round recap. How did you guys feel about this round? What was your favorite part of the round, or your least favorite part? I certainly know what mine was. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and I will see you tomorrow for my round 2 predictions. See you then.